There are two sides to every story. The National Broadcasting Company presents the vivid drama of life itself. Broadcasting's original program of mediation, The Court of Human Relations. And now, the man who has familiarized millions of people with the idea of mediation helped to make it a creative force in American life. A.L. Alexander.
If you were downtown shopping and were to go into a department store, let's say the stationery department, and find a $150 price tag on a pen, and then you were to wander into, let's say, furniture and find a $5 price tag on an upholstered chair, you'd conclude that someone had done a terrific job of mixing up the price tags. And yet, isn't it true that that's exactly what happens in our personal relationships every day? When we're very close to a situation, emotions can become so involved that our sense of values gets all mixed up, often with bitter consequences. And the wonderful thing about mediation is that people are willing to substitute the judgment of impartial persons for their own judgment, where they mistrust and reject the viewpoint of an adversary because he has a stake in the matter. His own wishes are involved. We welcome the members of our board who lend dignity and meaning to this hour by virtue of their participation. Miss Fannie Hurst, Dr. Ralph Emerson Davis, Dr. Robert J. McCracken. Now, as dangerous as a lighted bomb is that infernal machine known as the last word, and it has occurred to me as regrettable that certain basic aspects of the issue now about to be submitted for hearing and settlement did not have the benefit of this type of proceeding. I should say that, however trivial this issue may first appear, it has far-reaching implications, as will soon be seen. Now, here is the complainant party.
I come here to get this point settled with my wife. Why shouldn't a wife tell her husband everything that's going on in the home? He's got a right to know. I work hard all day long. I'm out of town sometimes. When I come home, she never says anything to me.
Well, now in particular, what was it that your wife did not tell you that she should have told you?
That my son quit school.
And if you had known that, what would you...
If I hadn't known that, I would have put pressure on. I never would have let him quit school because education is the most valuable thing in the world.
And what is it that annoys you?
It gripes me just to think that how hard I work and everybody else is taking it easy with their education.
You feel that if a person has an education, that makes life easier.
Life is much easier when you have an education. You're sitting down in an office and you're taking it easy. This way I'm out, I'm breaking my back all day long. And it just gripes me when I think about it.
Yes. Well, now, you've heard what your husband has said.
Well, if a person gets upset, there are many things you can tell. And also, if he's never home, leaving early, coming home late, sometimes not home for 2 or 3 days, how can you tell him anything?
Well, as a result of that, what did you have to do?
Well, I've always had to take full responsibility myself and doing things in my own way. And after threatening the teacher, I thought the less said about it, the better.
Well, now, we'll get into that in a minute, but what do you do for a living?
I'm a truck driver and I go cross-country.
You drive all night?
All night and sometimes all day.
And when do you get home?
When I do get home, the only thing I do is take a shower and change clothes and I'm back again.
And do you feel that the fact that you have to make a living should penalize you so that you are not in a position to know what's going on?
Well, I think a husband has got a right to know what's going on, even if there's a note left behind or something there that when he comes home, that he knows what's going on in the house.
Well, after this disturbance, we addressed the respondent wife. Why didn't you... Well, what was this disturbance about? And anyway, let's get to the bottom of this. What was it that you didn't tell your husband that so disturbs him?
That
Or why didn't you tell him?
Well, he gets upset about everything, and he's not home that often. Why should I upset him so much?
Well, did you feel that after this, you said tell us about, was there a fight or a quarrel? You said that you threatened somebody.
Yes, out of a clear sky one day I got a call from the dean of the school telling me he had my son in his office for threatening a teacher. I asked him what for, but got no satisfaction from him. So I asked him to put my son on, and after a lot of talk, he finally let me speak to the boy. And I asked my son what happened, and he told me that a teacher had pushed him around and roughed him up and ripped his jacket. So I asked the dean, why didn't you tell me that? He said that was beside the point, and that he was a lawyer and he knew the law, and he could do anything he wanted to do at any time. In other words, he could push my boy around any time. I said, I don't care if you're the President of the United States, you keep your hands off my boy. And I said, I'll be right over there.
And then what happened?
When I walked into the office, I said, is this Gestapo headquarters? And I told them that under no circumstance were they ever to lay a hand on my boy. They could give him detention or demerits or get in touch with his father or myself. And I never to lay a hand on him again, as I don't think they had the right. That's the parents' right, no one else's.
Did anything else happen?
Yes, they sent for the teacher. And when he came, I told him the same thing. And I told him if he ever dared lay a hand on my son again, I'd meet him outside.
So you'd wait for him outside?
That's right.
Are you the young man that has been referred to?
I am.
Well, suppose you give us your version.
Well, I was standing between periods. I was standing between periods outside the study hall talking to my friend when this teacher approached me, and he advised me that my seat had been changed and he wanted me there before the bell rang. I said I would be there and turned to my friend, when suddenly the teacher grabbed me, ripping my jacket, and said to me, "What did you say?" I said, "Nothing about you, and get your hands off me." He said, "We're going to the dean," which I did. When we got to the dean, I tried to tell my side of the story and show the dean my jacket, but the dean grabbed me and threw me up against the desk, and I thought he was going to go farther. And so, in order to protect myself, I took a swing at him.
If I known what was going on, I know my wife was very excited. And
What would you have done?
I would have handled this in a different way. Something, I mean, that when you know somebody's in a certain condition, you go ahead and you try to calm them down and you try to handle a situation altogether different. See, not everybody knows how my wife acts. And being that I know that education is a wonderful thing, and I still say he should have had more education.
Yes. Well, now, why did you give up?
Well, after the incident, it got around...
Can't hear you.
After this incident, it got around the school to all the teachers, and I was more or less in the doghouse. I had 2 strikes on me already. And where a pupil would receive a detention for something, I would get demerits. And I was piling up demerits left and right, and...
Demerits in what?
Citizenship.
Would you tell this board and all of us so we can understand in high school just what is citizenship?
Well, you get demerits if you cut class, come in late, conduct in general.
Your general attitude toward your work?
Yes.
And you got a lot of demerits. They just piled up.
Yes.
Well, how many did you get for this particular incident?
For this one incident, I received about 8 demerits.
And then after that, did you get a lot more demerits for other things?
Yes, I did. The teachers seemed to... I would get demerits where other people would get detention.
Did
They
you lose
took
all
advantage.
interest in your work?
Yes, because of this incident, I spent more time in the dean's office after that than I spent in my classrooms.
And then you quit?
Yes.
Can you imagine a boy with his IQ quitting school? He had an IQ that's out of this world, and there he had to give up school.
I think it should be stated that his IQ rating was verified, and at one point, after one test, it was 141, and on two other occasions, 121, which we all know is very substantial. Now, Ms. Hurst, how do you feel about this? First, there are several aspects to this issue. What about this question of the position of the father, that he feels that he should be told more, even though he has to earn a living out of town?
Well, on that one, as you say, there are so many facets that you want to jump on them all at once, but let's begin with the facet you suggest. I certainly think that here is a man, he certainly is out of town in the interest of his family. He isn't running around and enjoying life in diverse ways. And it does seem to me, regardless of his temperamental reactions, whatever they may be, of course we don't know that, we're on the outside, I think he is entitled to be taken into something as vital and as important as a situation such as this, which affects an entire life, a life that is very dear to this man.
And how about the
obviously.
fact that the father and mother, too, I'm sure, are very much concerned about his educational status?
I think that the wife has taken a great deal upon herself in depriving the husband of the right to share this crisis in a family, and a crisis it is, just in this one angle.
Of course, the father appreciates the value of education, high school and college education, knows what it can mean for the boy's future, for the boy's income. I would, however, want to say that failure to qualify in high school and in college needn't be fatal. It's not an irreparable failure. This country has a great many self-educated as well as self-made men, and if the boy has the IQ rating that we hear he has, what has happened needn't be pure tragedy in terms of his future.
Well, now, we felt that it would be proper, in view of certain implications here of a rather specialized nature, that we invite as consultant to the court and to the board a specialist in this field. And we're fortunate in having one of the nation's foremost authorities in the field of secondary education, the principal of the largest boys' high school in the world, Walter J. Degnan of New York's great DeWitt Clinton High School.
May I say first thank you for those kind words about my favorite school. Let me say, too, that I think he, like a lot of other young men his age, are going through a rather critical period when the quest for independence sometimes takes the form of rebellion. And it could easily be the case that the rebellion in his instance is rather significant and difficult to deal with. In most instances, a boy his age will rebel against the thought of going to school or perhaps a particular subject. But if he's supported by parents who are devoted and effective in their help, buttressed by their help, he frequently gets over that hurdle. Now, I suspect it may be too late to make an adjustment, but I would like to endorse what Dr. McCracken said about the fact that this is regrettable. It is not calamitous. And it might well be that if he is employed for a short period of time, he may, on his own volition, decide that continuing his education, particularly since he is bright.
Well, there's been a great deal of conjecture and even more misunderstanding in New York, and I'm sure in many parts of the country, on the question of the use of physical force in the public high schools, or whether or not there should exist the right to use it. Now, we'll of course eliminate criminal cases, of which there are a few, but what about the unruly, defiant boy, the boy who tends to disrupt instruction? Now, I know something about this particular case, and the facts as far as this boy's initial statements are true. I wasn't there, and this board isn't placing anyone on trial. But we understand that this boy was defiant of the teacher because the teacher allegedly placed his hands on him, and the boy said, "Take your hands off me," and then there was the dean and the altercation and all the rest that started. Now, we understand that the New York state law permits the teacher to use reasonable force in the performance of his duty, that this law is not applicable or exempts the city of New York, which has its own law or bylaw. And this provides that except under the most extraordinary circumstances, such as actual violence or self-protection, no physical force no voluntary, affirmative physical force of any kind may be used. Mr. Degnan, you are the principal of the largest boys' high school in the world. There's been a lot of controversy about this question of physical force. I'm going to ask you to listen, and I'm going to ask Dr. Davis what his opinion is as to the use of physical force in a public high school.
My judgment would be that the policy followed by New York City is a correct policy. I say that rather reluctantly because I understand the tremendous difficulty that arises in this kind of situation, and I'm tremendously sympathetic with the schools and with the teachers. This problem of discipline, especially with an unadjusted pupil, is exceedingly difficult. But won't we all agree that punishment of any kind is useless unless it can be administered in a constructive and a remedial fashion? If it's simply going to be an expression of hostility or revengefulness, then it's worse than no punishment at all. And by its very nature, corporal punishment seems to arouse hostility in the one who is administering it. I doubt very much whether anyone in this room, I doubt whether very many people in the United States can administer what we think of as corporal punishment and remain poised and constructive, objective, play the role of a doctor trying to heal a disease.
Well, Dr. Davis, if I may intrude, yes. Dr. McCracken, how do you feel about this question of corporal punishment? Was corporal punishment in vogue when you went to school? And of course, there's a lot that's happened since, but don't you feel that strong methods must be used? We have shocking situations in the public schools.
Well, I don't want to introduce the personal equation too much, but you're right. The use of what we knew as the tawse was frequent in Scottish schools.
What is that?
In my boyhood, a strap, a leather strap, not a cane, as is the case in England.
I've seen the canes.
Yes. But it was my own observation that the most effective teachers were not the teachers who were constantly flailing with the tawse or the strap. Brawn, I think, isn't nearly as effective as force of personality. And I have seen a slip of a girl take control of a class and discipline it in a way that would put to shame a husky man who somehow had no ability beyond physical force to keep a class disciplined and in order. All this, I think, points in the direction that Dr. Davis has indicated, that the New York City rule is in line with the rule whether we're thinking of penology or international relations.
Ms. Hurst, I think you believe that very rigid and vigorous methods must be utilized. Are you at all sympathetic with the role of the teacher, who may be faced with many perilous and desperate circumstances?
Well, I must agree with what has been said. I don't think that the role of force belongs in the climate of our civilization as it now exists. But I do feel very strongly that we have slipped along the way, and slipped in a very important way, in handling our problems where youth discipline is concerned. And I think that this little family here is an example. Now, here is a boy who has a fairly high IQ. Obviously, he's an intelligent young man. His mother, I think, probably has gone overboard in her maternalism. Well, that is a natural and understandable reaction. But I do not feel that this situation, as I understand it, where you probably jerked away from a teacher and a torn coat was the result, warrants. I can't go along with this idea of condoning and making the best of your throwing away an education. It seems to me that you have thrown away probably one of your most valuable assets in life, and over trivia. And that is what hurts, young man.
Well, we'd like to ask you this question. We address the young man. The point has been raised that you did a rather desperate thing, to say the least, in view of all the circumstances. Let's understand this incident, and this is not on trial. We're merely using this as a means of illuminating the entire situation. You defied the teacher, and you defied the dean. Now, why did you do those things?
because I was roughed up and manhandled. The jacket was ripped. I did not pull away, and it wasn't ripped that way. He grabbed me and pulled me up to him, ripping the jacket.
Well, it's possible, and we hold no brief for the teacher, but isn't it possible that this was an accident? What you object to, I mean the ripping, you object to the teacher putting his hand on you. Is that the idea?
He just didn't put his hand on me. He grabbed me and pulled me towards him.
Well, can you understand that he might have been aggravated by the situation, whatever the offense was, and in an attempt to call your attention to the seriousness of it, tried to bring you to grips with it, and we understand that you defied him and threatened him. What did you say to him when he did that?
I told him to keep his hands off me.
And did you tell him what you'd do to him if he didn't?
No, not really.
Did you tell him what you'd do to him if he didn't take his hands off?
I told him I'd put mine right back on him.
What would you do?
I'd defend myself in self-defense. I would swing back.
That's right. And there was this altercation with the dean when he entered the situation. And your attitude is that no teacher should put his hands on a pupil. Is that right?
That's right.
Suppose it were handled in a way that was somewhat different.
There are other ways to handle it. I mean, it would have been just as easy for him to, first of all, not to get so hot-headed, to ask me what I said. And second of all, if he didn't believe me, or if there was something he had heard and thought I said, he could have given me detentions or demerits for it.
Yes. I've merely conducted this questioning to illuminate the situation and to show, at least in this instance, and I'm sure there are counterparts, the reaction of a boy when apparently there was some kind of aggressiveness that was other than physical.
I think we have to go behind that, Mr. Alexander, to a system. Now, a system has created this nice boy's attitude toward a form of discipline. Now, I certainly think the matter of demerits is rather a mild kind of discipline. Certainly, I go along, I repeat, with the dangers of the physical approach. I think that we can safely count that out.
Mr. Degnan, as the principal of an important public school, will you give us briefly your philosophy of the prohibition of the use of physical force?
Well, I think in this enlightened age that teachers and parents and most people have an antipathy towards physical force. But there's a point made that many well-meaning people overlook that I think is rather significant. The effective teacher feels that physical force is the least effective way of controlling an individual or a group. He depends upon what I'll term a psychological advantage that grows out of his maturity, his training, and his experience. And perhaps one way of illustrating that point might be to take the case of the child who raises his voice in emotion for whatever reason. The teacher, if he is skilled, is more likely to lower his voice so that the child is not in a position to meet with him on equal terms. It is a psychological advantage, the kind of thing that Dr. McCracken referred to before, that is so important. And therefore, you will find, I think, the large body of teachers objecting to physical force because, in effect, it destroys them. And it places them on a level with the child, in a position where the child and the teacher are competing as equals, if you like. And that's regrettable. And, of course, I haven't said anything about rapport in general. But I do think that in this age we feel that rapport, the relationship that exists between a class and the teacher, is of paramount importance.
Well, there have been two aspects that have been under consideration here. One is the specific situation with regard to the boy with relation to his family. Certainly there are all kinds of pressures, psychological and otherwise, where this kind of family situation exists. And the father and the circumstances with relation to the father are clear. It's also to be regretted that at some point, and just who is to blame or at what source is not clear here, at some point, something might have been done to adjust the matter so that the boy could finish his formal high school education. Now, on the general question, the question that's been discussed at length here, because it goes to the heart of a matter that has widespread importance. This board is in agreement with Mr. Degnan's views on the prohibition of the use of physical force by teachers, and for the reasons stated, that there is urgent need for the strongest control otherwise. There is no question. It's already been stated, but I think it should be re-emphasized that this discussion was concerned with the situation in the schools of New York City, where there are special problems because of the thousands of students in one school and so many elements of all kinds involved. The sentiment of this board seems very clear on the point that under other circumstances and in communities where these problems do not exist, at least to the extent they do here, that corporal punishment should be utilized as a means of enforcing control. The board is in the strongest possible agreement that in view of the incredible delinquency, the shocking conditions that exist, forceful and vigorous controls must be utilized, but the character of this enforcement must be determined in accordance with the existing local situation. As we express our thanks to our mediators and bring this session of the Court of Human Relations to a close, may the hope be expressed as well that all resentment will be withdrawn and that the people in controversy will see the wisdom of compliance. It's always better to light a candle, said a wise man, than to curse the darkness.